Hello dear viewers, this is George from Ireland and I'm carrying on my series about the Ulster Troubles. So it got to 1998. That April, the Good Friday Agreement had been signed. It was then going to be put to the referendum. Now, the British government, led by Blair, was campaigning for a yes vote, as was the Irish government, led by Ahern. And incidentally, the two men had a very cordial working relationship. They both saw themselves as being of a certain generation, of being a certain internationalist, liberal left outlook. So the Good Friday Agreement had these cross-border bodies. Now, was that going to be the final revision of the situation between the two parts of Ireland, or was that the first step to a 32-county republic? Of course, nationalists and unionists had different interpretations of that. The unionist prognostication was that would be it. Anyway, Trimble said that the Good Friday Agreement was worth signing because it strengthens the union, and that was poo-pooed by many unionists. He was scorned by the DUP. Notably, he had the Progressive Unionist Party and the Ulster Democratic Party on his side, both quite minor, and both parties which had been pro-terrorist up until this point. As the negotiations were going on, Blair, in his autobiography, A Journey, said to the unionists, "What can we do?" And he said, they said, "Close Murrayfield." And Blair said, "Maryfield? What, the Scottish Rugby Stadium?" No, not Murrayfield, Maryfield. It's where the civil servants from the Republic of Ireland were. Anyway, it was closed down later that year, and I think is vacant to this day. So that was a confidence-building measure for the unionists. Devolution was going to come back. Another thing, so Sinn Féin Ardèche, that's conference was coming up to approve this deal because there was supposed to be a collective leadership, though those who opposed Adams did not end well. Anyhow, the Balcombe Street gang had been given some 24-hour release, and they were in prison for a few murders of civilians in Great Britain back in the mid-70s. And they came there and they were presented to the crowd, and it was electrified, as the Daily Telegraph said. Adams said it's about releasing our Nelson Mandelas. Well, Nelson Mandela did not fight against a democratic system like existed in Northern Ireland. There was no discriminatory legislation in Northern Ireland, things like that. The difference is, well, we could go on all day, though we didn't have such a free press in South Africa. So it was a grossly offensive and utterly dishonest thing to say, but that was par for the course coming from Adams, who also said he'd never been in the IRA. So 95% of Sinn Féin delegates voted in favour of this agreement. Anyway, so there was going to be a referendum that June. Both parts of Ireland voted on it on the same day, and that would almost never happened since 1918. Only in European elections once it had happened. So every party except the Irish Republican Socialist Party and Republican Sinn Féin were in favour. They were tiny parties with nobody in Dáil Éireann. Anyhow, in the north, the SDLP, the Alliance Party, half the UUP campaigned for it. Sinn Féin did as well. A minority faction that UUP was against. The UUP was totally against, as was the Ulster, as was the UK Unionist Party. Anyway, various rallies were held. John Hume and Trimble held hands at this concert where Bono was there. And Trimble was asked, what about the Reverend Robert Bradford, who'd been shot dead by the IRA in 1982, and indeed his janitor, Bradford's janitor, had been killed by the IRA. And Trimble was able to read out a letter from the man's widow saying that she fully approved of the agreement. So the Orange Order said they couldn't recommend the agreement to their members. Notably, they didn't actually oppose it. So in the Irish Republic, it was a 94% yes vote. In Northern Ireland, 71% yes. So the fact that there was going to be yes vote in Northern Ireland was not in doubt. But Paisley went on to say that the majority of Unionist voters were against. Unionist voters are not the only ones who count. Almost all nationalists in the north voted for it, and Unionists, it was about evenly split. The yes vote was so much larger in the Republic of Ireland. Why? Perhaps it because it was more favourable to nationalists. Unionists had things largely their own way up until this point in the north, but so it was not really a net gain for them. Anyway, so the customary standoff at Drumcree occurred yet again. Mad Dog was there, Johnny Adair, who was in UDA, this muscle-bound dwarf who was a particularly nasty piece of work, utterly malevolent. He was in trouble as a teenager for beating up an elderly Protestant man, so it wasn't even a sectarian attack. He was willing to attack anyone, and he just joined any gang of hoodlums who would have him. And he cheerfully admits that had he been born a mile away in a Catholic family, he would have been in the IRA. So he didn't believe in anything. He's utterly vile. So He was not a member of the Orange Order, but he was hanging around there. So during that standoff in '98, somebody threw a petrol bomb into a house where this family was living. There were a mixed marriage, as they used to say in Northern Ireland, as in Catholic Protestant, and 3 children were burnt to death. The Reverend William Bingham of the Orange Order said, "Is any march worth the life of 3 little kids?" And said, "No, we must stop our protests and stop demanding go down to Garvaghey Road, lest we be somehow accused of being connected to this crime." Trimble as well did not go to Drumcree and said the only way we can distance ourselves is to say we're not going to insist on going down Garvaghey Road this year. And of course, some people felt this was feeble of him. Senator David Norris from the Republic of Ireland had been there observing the marches on behalf of the Irish government. He's Church of Ireland, incidentally. And he pointed out that the Orangemen had given a face-saving excuse not to try and insist on going down that road. Now, there was some head case protesters who said we'd wait here for 100 years protesting, but we will get down that road eventually. The Orange Order had voluntarily rerouted dozens of marches every year, but they thought it will have to be blocked from another road and another, and eventually we'll have none left. We've already been very accommodating, and we've got to draw the line somewhere and insist on our rights to freedom of expression, even when that's tendentious, even when people on a certain street don't like that. They pointed out that the IRA would sometimes parade without arms at this time. So the Garvaghey dispute was a way for the IRA to let off steam without actually killing anyone. Lesser acts of rioting, burning buses and things like that, and loyalist thugs were doing that as well. But the Orange Order's presence at Drumcree gradually decreased. So I remember speaking to a teenage Protestant from Limber Valley back then, and I suppose he spoke for a newer generation, saying, somebody won a battle hundreds of years ago, who cares? I don't know if he was a unionist, actually. So the Orange Order had almost 100,000 people protesting at Drumcree in '95. Not all of them Orangemen, but it was dwindling in late '98. So anyway, the future seemed to be looking better. The situation was calming down. Then the 15th of August 1998, there was a fair in Omagh, which is the county town of Tyrone. And the real IRA was a splinter group. They broke from the provisional IRA because they were dead against the Good Friday Agreement, and they set off a bomb. There'd been a garbled warning, and 29 people were killed. It was the most deadly single bomb in the whole Troubles. Some Spanish school children were amongst those who were killed. Blair vowed that the killers would be caught, which was a grossly irresponsible thing to do, and just typical of his charlatan behaviour. No government can guarantee that the bombers are going to be caught, and that's the kind of thing which used to lead the police decades ago to arresting the usual suspects and manufacturing evidence against them. Anyway, those who committed the murders have never been convicted. Omagh was visited by McGuinness to express his sympathy, but he was barracked by some people there, said no, they're no friends of ours who did this. For the first ever time, he spoke out against a Republican atrocity. So the 32 County Sovereignty Committee was the real IRA's political party with offices in Dundalk, and furious crowds were there shrieking at them. So the 32 County Sovereignty Committee were reeling from this public backlash. They too called a ceasefire, though eventually they ended that. It was led by Bernadette Sands McKevitt and Michael McKevitt, her husband. Bernadette was the sister of Bobby Sands, who died on hunger strike in 1981, so she enjoyed a certain standing in Republican circles for that reasons. As she correctly said, her brother didn't die for a few cross-border bodies on milk marketing. So the Provisional IRA continued lesser crimes, such as mutilating people they accused of being criminals, as did their loyalist counterparts. So that December, the LVF declared a ceasefire, handed in some of their weapons, which were then destroyed. It was filmed that they were being cut up in a metal workshop, which is extraordinary because the LVF had been founded only 3 years earlier, and they were utterly opposed to even the mildest concessions to nationalists. And once their kingpin, King Rat, had been eliminated, they pretty soon folded. Well, that was good news, of course. So it was really a one-man band, and once it was decapitated, the LVF ended. Another loyalist terrorist organisation was founded, the Red Hand Defenders. They were setting off a few blast bombs, and they murdered an RUC officer, Frankie Riley, who was a Catholic, as it happens. So anyway, the Provisional IRA was supposed to hand in their weapons, but Sinn Féin said, no, we'd only say we'd use our good officers to persuade them to do so. We can't do so. We can't assure you that was going to happen because the Sinn Féin and the IRA are different organisations. which was not very credible. There was graffiti in Republican areas, not one bullet, as in we weren't handing any weapons whatsoever. And the unionists were adamant that this must happen. It was crucial to the agreement. They wouldn't have agreed with it otherwise. How do we know you're not going to restart the conflict? So prove that we can trust you, that you're not going to assassinate us later on. So the UK government was overly sympathetic to Sinn Féin because Blair got on with Adams. Well, he's a modern sort of guy like me. He had charisma, whereas Trimble was, how to put it, more of an introvert, more of a nerd, and didn't have that personal connection with him. So Blair was saying, jump together. Why do you have a coalition? And then the IRA will disarm, which might not even have happened if that was the case. Another thing is some British soldiers who had murder convictions in Northern Ireland were released. 2 Scots Guards and Lee Clegg, he'd shot at a car when people were speeding past his checkpoint, but the fatal shot was fired at them after they'd passed the checkpoint, and therefore after they were an immediate threat. They were set free with a royal pardon. That's enough for the moment.